The UK has some of the most ambitious green energy goals on the planet. But there seems to be this massive gap between the promise of a clean, cheap energy future and the pretty high price we're all paying for it right now. So what's really going on? Let's get into it.
Okay, so it all really kicks off with this simple, really powerful promise. Back in late 2025, the Energy Secretary made a pledge. A big expansion of clean energy would directly cut household energy bills by £300. A clear, tangible benefit for pretty much everyone. But, well, that is the multi-billion-pound question, isn't it? As we're about to see, the reality on the ground is proving to be way more complex and, frankly, a lot more expensive.
To really understand why, we first have to talk about a really fundamental challenge in our energy system. Think of it like a massive traffic jam, but for electricity.
Look, let's be clear, the UK has been incredibly successful at building new renewable energy sources. We're an absolute world leader in offshore wind, with these huge farms generating massive amounts of clean power, especially up in windy Scotland.
But here's the catch. All that power needs a way to get from where it's made to where we need it, in our homes and our businesses. And right now, our national grid, that superhighway for electricity, is basically in a state of gridlock. It just wasn't built for this much new power coming from all these new places.
And that gridlock leads to something that sounds completely, totally backwards. It's called curtailment. This is when the grid is so congested that operators actually have to pay wind farms to switch their turbines off, just to stop the whole system from getting overloaded. Yeah, we are literally paying for power that we can't even use.
And the scale of this is just staggering. In just the first 6 months of 2025, northern Scotland had to throw away 4 terawatt-hours of wind power. To put that into perspective for you, that is enough clean electricity to power every single home in Scotland for an entire year. Just wasted. So, all this wasted power, who ends up footing the bill? Well, that cost doesn't just vanish into thin air. It ends up right on our energy bills.
In 2024, the direct cost to UK consumers for all this discarded wind power was nearly £400 million. I mean, that is a huge bill for energy that never even made it onto the grid in the first place.
And the really scary part? The problem is speeding up. In 2025, we've already blown past the £1 billion mark for these payments. The cost is just spiraling, and it's far, far higher than what we saw just the year before. And all these extra system costs, well, they add up. When you actually compare what we're paying for electricity at home, UK households are paying a staggering 93% more than the median price across the EU and the UK. The bottom line is our bills are some of the highest in Europe.
Now you might be thinking, hang on, with all this new wind power, surely our energy is mostly green by now. Well, not exactly. In the first part of 2025, natural gas was still the single largest source of our electricity, actually beating out wind. And that has a huge impact on the price. And here it is. This is the crucial flaw in the system. The price for all electricity is set by the most expensive power source needed to meet demand at any given moment. And in the UK, 98% of the time, that's natural gas. So even when the wind is howling and generating tons of cheap, clean power, your bill is still tied to the high, volatile price of fossil fuels.
So we're paying a really high price for this transition. And it kind of makes you step back and ask, with all these costs, what exactly is the UK's role in the bigger global climate picture?
Well, when you look at the numbers, the data shows the UK is responsible for less than 1% of global carbon dioxide emissions from burning fuel. It's a number that really helps to frame the scale of our national efforts in the whole global context.
To put that in an even sharper perspective, let's look at this. The UK's annual emissions are around 0.4 gigatons of CO2. China's are nearly 12. We're just talking about completely different orders of magnitude on the world stage.
But there is a really important bit of nuance here that you have to consider. When you look at it on a per-person basis, emissions in China have now actually caught up to the UK. It's a complicated picture, and it's changing all the time.
So how do we start to bridge this massive gap between the promises of green policy and the pretty tough economic and technical realities that we're facing? The core challenges are really clear, right? Our grid just can't handle the new power we're making. We don't have enough storage to save that energy from when we actually need it, and our market rules are keeping prices stubbornly high. And look, it's not just us saying this. Official bodies are sounding the alarm. The UK's own Climate Change Committee gave a really blunt verdict in mid-2025. They said that despite all the promises, quote, no progress has been made on actually cutting bills for households.
And this presents a huge political challenge. Public support for the goal of net zero is pretty solid, but that support drops off a cliff the moment you start talking about the cost. That fragility, it makes the politics of all this incredibly difficult to navigate.
So, what's the path forward? Well, the analysis suggests we need a major shift in focus. Instead of just building more and more turbines, the priority has to be on integration. That means aggressively upgrading the grid, investing in massive energy storage solutions, and fundamentally reforming the market so that cheap renewables finally lead to cheaper bills.
Which leaves us with this one big, final thought. We all know the goal is critical, but we have to ask the hard question. Is our current approach, with its spiraling costs and all this wasted energy, really the most effective way to get there? It's a question that demands a pretty urgent answer. Thanks for joining me.